Hello, I am Gamer Vince, and this is my tutorial on Masters of Orion 2. I'm going to be taking you sort of step by step through game setup and creating a race. That's what this first video is going to be about, and then my next video is actually going to be about playing the game. And why should you care? Why play Master of Orion 2? It is an old game. We're talking about mid-90s here. It's pretty dated. Well, I think this is a game that has actually aged quite well. We live in a modern age of modern, super graphics and all that. But a game is not defined by its graphics. There's a lot of fun to be had with older games. And I think this game has some really solid mechanics. I think it's a lot of fun regardless. You can get this game off of GOG, Good Old Games, and that's exactly what this is. It's a good old game. And it's got a lot of replayability. For those of you who don't know, this is sort of like, it's very similar to Civilization. It reminds me a lot of a board game. You take turns, you move units around a map, you do things to upgrade it. It's pretty similar to Civilization in a lot of ways, but it takes place in space, so therefore is superior to most Civilization games. I have to say most now, because Civilization has gone to space. But without further ado, let's get started. So we're going to click on New Game here, and this is the first screen you'll be greeted with when you click New Game. Difficulty level, that's pretty self-explanatory. You pick the difficulty that's right for you. If you're just starting out, start as Tutor. The AI is very forgiving then, and they're not going to bum rush you right away. They're going to give you some time to build up and learn some of the mechanics. Galaxy Size, that's purely a preferential thing. You can have sort of clustered stars, where I think is a large galaxy cluster, where you can have like a huge map. To be perfectly honest, the only thing that really matters for is how long of a game you want to have. The bigger the galaxy tends to be the game longer, even with fewer players. And make sure that the galaxy size is appropriate for the number of players. You don't want to have 8 players in a small map. That's just a recipe for disaster. But we're going to do 3 players on a medium map. I think that's going to be pretty good. Now, the first two things, the first thing that's really going to impact the game a whole lot is galaxy age. And you might not be able to figure out from galaxy age what that means, but what it's asking you is what type of planets you're going to find. I like to play on average, but the other choices are organic rich and mineral rich. What that means is that mineral rich, you will find lots of minerals. It's good for production. Basically in the game, your workers are going to do one of 3 things. They're either going to be farmers, workers like industrial kind of production, churning out ships and buildings and all that kind of thing, or they're going to be scientists. Mineral rich helps them out if they are workers, industrial. If they're doing industrial processes, mineral rich helps them out, and it makes mineral rich planets just make industrial processes a lot quicker. So that's what mineral rich does, and you'll find lots of mineral rich planets. And this, by the way, is sort of like what the universe looked like in its early stages. Yeah, so that's what you find there. Average is usually what I play because you kind of need multiple types of planets. Organic rich is the other one. Organic rich means you'll find that's a bonus to farmers, essentially. You'll find lots of nice Terran planets, but that might be low on minerals. So basically, organic rich good for farmers, mineral rich good for workers, industrial workers, and average you'll find both. And I usually do average because you really need both. You need maybe 1 or 2 planets that are producing food heavily, and I usually prefer to have most of my planets spec'd out for industrial processes, but you need both. So average, you'll find both. So that's usually what I go for. Players goes up to anything from 2 to 8. Got to have at least 1 opponent. Where for our purposes, we'll just do 3 players. Be aware that does include yourself, so it's 2 computers. And then tech level. Tech level is another big choice that you can make. Essentially what tech level does is you get to pick what kind of technologies you start the game with. You can do post warp, which is usually the one I start with, where you have a lot of the technologies, the sort of basic technologies. You're not going to have to take time to research them. You just kind of start out with them. So does everybody. You can go all the way up to advanced. That one gives you a lot of technologies that I think are kind of optional, technologies you don't necessarily need, but that is definitely an option. And then there's some of the lower technology levels, like pre-warp, where you basically start off, I believe, with absolutely no technologies, and you're first going to have to sort of research getting off your own planet, and then average. I recommend playing at either average or post-warp. I feel like in pre-warp, you're researching technologies that are just so basic that it just kind of slows down the game. You're going to be spending a lot of turns of just sitting there waiting for these basic technologies to research because you have nothing to build. You just have a couple of research things to do. Average takes care of that. Average, you have a couple of basic technologies. You have stuff to do in the first couple of rounds instead of just waiting around to research things. So average is a pretty good one. I usually do post-warp because I like to speed my game up a little bit. The early stages are not like the most interesting sometimes. In post-warp, you're already starting to explore planets, and you get a free colony ship to establish your second colony, which if you're starting at average tech level, the absolute first thing you want to do is, well, the first thing you want to be building towards. It's not the first thing you want to do, but the first milestone is getting your first colony ship so you can establish a second colony. And I feel like everything in the early game is based around establishing a second colony. If you do tech level post-warp, you get a free colony ship just to begin with, and I feel like there's a lot more options then. I feel like every single race, no matter who you play, you've got to get a second colony going just to give you options. And if you start with post-warp, then it opens up a lot more. So that's where I'm going to be playing. Then you've got these options here. You can do... I'll talk about the Antarans first. So the Antarans are an alien race that lives outside of the map. You're not going to be able to just waltz up to them, and they're a very sophisticated, powerful alien race that live in like another dimension. And the Antarans are going to, if you click this, if this is on, they're going to periodically attack the galaxy, and they're going to attack a player randomly. And that could screw you over, it could help you. It's a little bit random, and at the end of the game, or sort of one of the victory conditions that you can complete is killing the Antarans, going to their homeworld and just blowing them up by building one very late game technology which allows you to build like a dimensional portal. That allows you to go to the Antaran homeworld and blow them up, and because they're bastards, destroying them is a good thing and makes you win. And everybody just kind of agrees that that was a good thing to do, and we declare you the winner. So that's like one victory condition. That said, though, the Antarans are so powerful that I've never played a game where I was able to kill the Antarans and not able to just kill everybody else. It was always the kind of scenario where I'm like, yes, I could go completely trounce my opponents with my giant weapons, or I could build up a little bit more and go fight the Antarans. So, to be perfectly honest, the Antarans, I mean, it's a nice little thing to do at the end, like have one big showdown with them. It's just a nice way to end a game, so that's nice, but be aware that if you turn this on, you may get attacked by them. Random events are exactly what they say. They're random galactic events that just happen every now and again, and they can be good or bad. They can be galactic disasters or good things. And this can end up really screwing you over, or it can help you a little bit. There is a trait that you can pick later called Lucky. When you're building your race, you can choose to be a lucky race, and then random events are going to be primarily beneficial for you. So, if you are intending to take Lucky, then, well, Lucky doesn't do anything if you don't have random or Antaran attacks. The Antarans don't attack you as much if you're Lucky. So if you're doing random events, I actually recommend you get Lucky, because sometimes random events can really screw you over. And if you're not intending to get Lucky, I would just not take random at all. And last is tactical combat. Now, in the game, essentially what you can do is you can play the game perfectly fine without tactical combat. And to be perfectly honest, I don't think it adds that much to the game. It's sort of like you do a lot of galactic management and you send your fleet to go fight another fleet, and if you keep this off, the game will just tell you how the combat went, and it usually goes how you'd expect. You may lose a unit or two, like you can come over, you can if odds are in your favor, you'll tend to win, and you may lose a unit or two if it was kind of close. It does a good job of calculating it all for you. If you have tactical combat on, you're actually going to go into the battle and fight the battle yourself. You're going to command ships, and there's two problems with this. One is that it is rather complicated. I think it adds unnecessary complexity to the game. You're also going to be building your ships. Like, if you have this on, you can build and outfit your ships yourself. While if you keep this off, I'm pretty sure the ships are just built for you. And they're going to put like the best technologies and everything on there for you. So, to be perfectly honest, I don't think that is necessary complexity. I feel like there usually is a kind of right way to build a ship. I'm probably wrong about that. I'm sure you can like have a strategy and everything, but I feel like it's unnecessary complexity. So the problem is, so the first problem is that it's kind of complicated, and I think it's unnecessary. And the second problem is that it's just really time consuming. Fighting every single battle it takes time. Like turns can take quite a bit of time as is, and if you're encountering like multiple, if you're doing like a multi-front war, turns can literally take hours. If you're agonizing over the battles, it can take forever to do that. So I usually just like telling the game, letting the game tell me how the combat went, because more often than not, it just goes exactly how you'd expect anyway. So yeah, tactical combat, I would definitely don't do it for your second game, or even for like your don't do it for your first game. I wouldn't even recommend it for your second or third game. So, tactical combat, do not recommend to begin with. If you start to master this game and you want added complexity, then I'd go for tactical combat. But I've played this game a decent amount, and I'm still not really like I tried tactical combat once or twice, and it just slowed down the game to me too much for me. So, you can do this. Do not recommend for your first game. Okay, so this is our setup. I'm going to do post-warp just so I'll be able to show you a couple of things. And we're going to keep all this like this. We've got 3 players, medium, galaxy, average. We're going to do tutor difficulty because I'm not actually going to play through this game. I'm just going to show you the setup and show you a little bit about it. Okay, so that's all good. Then you're going to pick a race. So you can pick from all these pre-made races. Everything from like the Sakra, who are like... they have large populations, are kind of warlike, they grow very fast, to like the Cylons, who are more peaceful, and they are very good with technology. There's all these different races, but the thing you really want to do every time is custom race. You want to build a race from scratch. The reason for that is that, one, a lot of these races are kind of suboptimal. You can see in the bottom corner here what abilities they have, what bonuses and minuses they have, and to be perfectly honest, the game doesn't do a very good job of telling you what they are on this screen. Like, it's charismatic and they've got they're charismatic and they have a democracy. That's humans. Okay, what does that mean? The game doesn't tell you on this screen what that is. While on the custom screen, it totally will tell you what that is. And these races are just all kind of suboptimally built. They always have something where I'm like, that's not that great. Like the Bulrathi are good with combat, and they're high gravity oriented, and they've got a dictatorship. That's all right. So you pretty much always want to do a custom race. Not just because you can sort of optimize what you build, but you can also tailor it to your play style. And you're going to understand exactly what your race can do because you're the one who built it. So that's what we're going to do. So when you click custom race, you get to select a race picture. You basically get to just look like one of these. And aside from just, that's what your race are going to look like in the game, which is sort of going to dictate, like if you go talk to your scientist guy, what is he going to look like? Is he going to look like an Alarian, or is he going to look like a Darlock? I mean, It's going to determine that, but far more importantly, it's essentially going to eliminate one of these races as an option for you to fight against. So if you become the Darlocks, if you take the Darlock picture, even though you're not the Darlocks, you can rename yourself, you can have totally different abilities, but if you take their picture, then you're not going to encounter the Darlocks in the game. What that means is that one of the things I usually, I quite often pick the Sakura because I struggle against the Sakura in the game. They're pretty strong, they grow very fast, they get lots of people, which I quite often, I see them do quite well quite often, so I'm going to pick the Sakura to look like the Sakura because, one, they look kind of cool. Purple dinosaur people, why not? But also, on the other hand, I kind of struggle with them. So if you, for instance, play the game a couple of times and every time you're like, man, those Cylons and their awesome technology, I struggle with them every time they show up, you can actually choose to look like the Cylons and take them out of the game. But I'm going to become the Sakura. Okay, and now for the rest of this video, I'm just going to talk about this screen. In my video after this, I'm going to actually talk about, the once you're in the game, what you do. Right now, I'm just going to talk about this screen because there's a lot of information here, and it's kind of intimidating the first time you come here. Okay, so first thing I did is I hit clear. To just clear all the selections, because what it had pre-selected for me is the Sakura, what the Sakura had. So everything that other races can do, you can select here. So if you're ever like, wow, what did that race do that made them so powerful? Well, it's somewhere on this screen. Alright, so first I hit clear, and you have 10 points to spend on these various abilities. If it has a minus, that means you actually gain those points instead of losing them. So if I've reduced my ship attack, I would have 12 points to spend. So what do these all do? These 5 over here are sort of flat bonuses to various aspects of your economy. These 4 up here are combat oriented. Well, actually not the spying, but they're sort of flat bonuses towards combat, these 3, and this one's for spying. Then you can pick a government type here. And then over here are the special abilities. The special abilities are just sort of various things that impact the game in various ways. They're just all over the place. Okay, so first, let's talk about these 5 over here. Population, farming, industry, science, and money. Population, so in the game, you basically assign your population to do things like you'll make them farmers and workers and scientists, and they'll do things for you. So the more people you have, the better. In fact, population is a big factor in the game of whether you're going to be successful. So having your population grow faster is actually quite nice. I believe the Sakura that I picked have an extra, their population has grows twice as fast as anybody else's. So that's really nice. That said, though, and most of these are just flat bonuses. So you've got the population growth. Farming is per worker, so this makes your farmers more productive, or less productive if you choose to nerf them. Industry makes your workers more productive or less productive, and then science, of course, works on scientists, and money is just a flat kind of bonus. You get. You're either going to get more money per turn or less money per turn. That said, I very rarely take any of these bonuses. And the reason for that is that if you take a penalty here, any of these minuses, that's going to really hurt at the beginning. Because at the beginning, you have very little. In the beginning, it's very difficult to get to 2... It's not that difficult to get to 2 food per worker. But if you get a minus a half, then you're only going to be getting I'm pretty sure that rounds down. No, actually, I think it doesn't round at all. So you're going to be losing half a food per worker, which is not good. That's going to really slow you down. You're going to have to use a lot more workers on farming. Same with industry. You're not going to be producing as fast in science. At the beginning, it really slows you down. But then on the other hand, the bonuses, they do speed you up a little bit in the beginning. It is kind of nice at the beginning to just have a part of the game that you're not going to be worried about. But it's relatively expensive for the benefit. An additional food per worker costs 4 race picks. And the worst part is that later in the game, these bonuses are going to be largely irrelevant. They'll be overshadowed by your technologies. So yeah, +1 production is pretty useful at the beginning, but it won't take long for that +1 production to just be completely overshadowed by the rest of your technologies. So that's why I usually stay away from them, is because crippling yourself in the beginning is bad, and the little bit of benefit you get for at the beginning for some of the bonuses, I'm not sure are worth the points. So usually stay away from these. That said, though, if I had to go for one of these, I would either probably stick with either... I mean, they can all be pretty good. The money one I'm not too sure of is really ever worth it, because the money, the little bit of extra money you get is not really worth it. Oh, by the way, and if any of the stuff I'm telling you, you know, if you don't remember while looking at the screen, right-click on these things, and it will tell you. It will tell you a little bit about it. Okay, but that's these. Like I said, I don't usually go for them. You can. I'm just not sure if it's really worth it. Once you know more about the game, like if you're like, yeah, I'm gonna do an industrial specialized race, and I'm gonna get like the production, and I'm gonna get a rich homeworld, and do all kinds of things to just boost my production, then I feel like it could combo well with some other stuff. But if you're not intending to combo them, I wouldn't go for it. All right, combat. These combat ones are actually not that bad. I usually take them actually to gain points rather than to gain benefits from them. So I usually go for like -10 ground combat. That's one I quite often go for. The reason why I go for the -10, I mean, these are pretty self-explanatory. You know, this nerfs or improves your ship defense, and none of these are really insurmountable. Like if you come up against somebody who has +50 ship defense and +50 ship attack, and you've got -20 in both of those, your ships are going to be significantly weaker, and it's going to take you a long time to sort of get to their level. But that said, it's not an insurmountable problem. Given enough resources and enough technologies, you can level the playing field quite quickly. So that's why I think the benefits aren't that great, and the minuses I quite often take. I usually try to leave my ships alone, but I quite often nerf my spying and my ground combat. And spying, I'll explain sort of when what the role of spying is later, but I feel like you have other avenues to get what you could get through spying, and even if you really need to spy, a -10 isn't that bad. I mean, it's pretty bad. People are going to be stealing technologies from you a lot, and that's one of the purposes of spying, is stealing technologies. But if you sort of you can counter that problem quite easily with just having lots of spies. Ground combat is one that I'm not concerned with usually at all. I just take the -10 almost always, simply because I focus on ship combat. If you defeat them in the sky, you don't have to worry about on the ground. Like, this makes your ground units weaker, but if they never hit the ground, then who cares? And also, if you attack them, most of your ships can bombard a planet, which means that, you know, you can like bombard the planet for a couple of rounds, kill some of the ground units, and then send in your ground combat team if you're really worried about the ground combat, you know. Or you can just wipe out the colony if you want. I mean, ground combat literally doesn't have to happen unless you want it to. That said, if early on in the game you want to conquer lots of planets from your opponents, which I don't recommend, I tend to go for like a little bit more peaceful way, because if you start combat with somebody, it can get ugly quite fast. So for your first game, I don't recommend you pick fights. I feel like being peaceful is probably a little bit easier to start with. But yeah, I pretty much always go for the -10 ground combat, because even if I tend to be combat heavy, I usually go with ships. Okay, so yeah, that's all that. Governments. So there's 4 types of governments you can go for. Unification is like a hive mind type thing. They get bonuses to like production. They don't have many traders in their midst. It's very difficult for what assimilation means is that when you capture a planet with enemy people on it, they assimilate into your culture, into your race, and they assimilate very slowly through unification. But they've got that plus 50% to productivity, which is huge, and a plus 50 bonus to food production. It's all very, very good. So unification is pretty good. Democracy, I think, is pretty decent. I find it kind of funny that you take your defensive agents are penalized -10 due to the emphasis on personal freedoms. What that basically means is that, you know, you're basically doing like wiretapping and spying on your own people to prevent enemy spies, and you get a penalty in democracy. But then you get all these other bonuses. You get additional taxes and research. So I think democracy is actually not quite as good as unification, even though it's more expensive. I think unification is pretty nice. Dictatorship is the baseline, and that's the one I recommend you play with to begin with, because democracy and unification they impact the game a whole lot in terms of the resources you get, and they're pretty nice. But I feel like they kind of skew your view of the game. And there's a lot of things they do that you may not be aware of, and they're kind of expensive. I'm not sure exactly if they're even worth it. But dictatorship does very little. You get a little bit of your defensive agents get a little bit of a boost, and the only thing you really need to worry about is the fact that your planets are going to suffer a morale penalty until they build a marine barracks on the planet. So just make sure you build a marine or armor barracks on every one of your planets. Just don't forget that if you're a dictatorship, and you'll be fine. Like, there's nothing else bad. There's not a whole lot to keep track of with dictatorship, and dictatorship also is free. That's the baseline. That's the baseline government. It costs points to get to democracy or unification, and you actually gain points for going feudal, but feudal has a lot of sort of penalties associated with it. The most devastating of which is that minus 50% of research. Technology is really important, and having your research generated by scientists being reduced by 50% is just kind of awful. So I do not recommend feudal. Dictatorship's the one I recommend. Okay, so that was a lot. Let's talk about special abilities. After I talk about special abilities, I'm going to call this a part. And then in my next video, I'm going to actually get into the game. Okay, so special abilities. What do we have here? Some of the easiest ones to describe are the large homeworld, rich homeworld, poor homeworld, artifacts world, which is also should be artifacts homeworld. Essentially what these are is they just affect the planet you start on. And that's more important the less advanced technology you pick at the unlike one of the previous screens. If you begin in like pre-warp, where you're stuck on your homeworld and your homeworld alone for a long time, then having some of those homeworld buffs are pretty good. Otherwise, it becomes less important because you're going to have other worlds as well. Like if 90% of your if 9 out of 10 planets isn't your home world, like if you have 10 planets, only one of them is going to be your home world, most of your economy, most of your stuff is just going to come from other planets, and it's not going to have that big of an impact. But it can be a nice bonus to begin with. Large homeworld just means greater population possibility. It does not mean you start with a greater population, but it can grow to a larger population. Rich means that an increase to production, and poor means a decrease to production. This, by the way, means minerals. Mineral rich, mineral poor. Not like the wealth of the people. Artifact just gives you a flat bonus to research from that planet, which is it's okay. I don't think the artifact world is usually worth it because it's kind of expensive at 3. If it was like 1 or 2, I'd consider it, but at 3, it's just a little bit expensive. Okay, so that's what these are. Let's talk about these ones up here: the low gravity world, high gravity world, and aquatic. Those basically means that your people are attuned to certain kinds of worlds. The low gravity world is actually a penalty, is that basically means that your people grew up on a low gravity world, which means I don't think they're going to take the penalty. Yeah, they get rid of the penalty on low gravity worlds, which is a small penalty, but normal gravity worlds, which are really really nice to have, you take a penalty on those. And low gravity troops are just kind of weaker. So basically low gravity means there's going to be some planets that your people are, normal gravity planets, your people are going to be uncomfortable on. High gravity worlds is the opposite, where your people are accustomed to high gravity world, which means that they don't take a penalty for high gravity worlds. And they're also just stronger. They're built beefier, having grown up on high gravity worlds. So that's fine. Aquatic just means your people are aquatic, and basically there's going to be a couple of, like, if you go to a tundra or swamp world, which are actually kind of rare, And if you're those planets are treated as Terran, which is really nice. And then ocean and Terran planets are treated as Gaia, and Gaia is sort of the best planet you can be on. So basically, and that's mostly for farming, mostly for farming purposes. So aquatic just kind of upgrades some planets for farming purposes and for population purposes as well. So aquatic, most of these three up here I don't think are usually worth it. They're either very expensive. The low gravity world one is actually quite a big penalty, and that's a penalty you can't get rid of. Most of the stuff can be mitigated. Low gravity worlds is difficult to mitigate. Yeah. So I wouldn't go for these. I usually don't go for these three. But then, that said, Subterranean right here is one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best special abilities you can get. So what Subterranean does is it literally doubles the population on your worlds. Like, just the normal population is doubled on every one of your worlds. And more population means doing more of everything. More scientists, more workers, more farmers, more everything. More people is a good thing. The higher your population, the better it is. And doubling your population on planets is huge. I mean, you cannot beat Subterranean worlds in terms of population. You're just not going to. And that's another one the Sakura start with, the people that I'm copying. And that's one of the reasons why I struggle with them, is because their population is so big. So Subterranean is a good one. Subterranean also works really well with a large homeworld. A large homeworld only costs one more to have, and with Subterranean, so large homeworld increases the population you can have in your world, and then Subterranean doubles that, so that's really freaking good. Alright, other things. Cybernetics. Cybernetic gives you just a couple of buffs, usually to ship repair and that kind of thing. I don't think it's usually worth it, so I usually ignore Cybernetic. Lithivore means your people eat rocks, which means you don't need farms. It's a very, very good upgrade, but is it worth 10? That's the question you're going to have to ask yourself. So Lithivore, it just gets rid of that aspect of the game, kind of. Like, you don't have to worry about farms, ever. Repulsive is actually a decent one to take. If you're going to take a penalty, and you want lots of points, Repulsive is one that I would consider. So what Repulsive does is you basically you don't get as much from trade. You can't get trade agreements, actually, like, at all. People hate dealing with you. You cannot. It just removes sort of the diplomacy aspect of the game. So you're not going to be able to ask for trade agreements. You're not going to be able to build relationships with your neighbors, which is bad. That is definitely a minus. Because I feel like if you can stay at peace with your neighbors, then that's a big bonus. That is something you don't have to worry about, and war costs money. That said, though, if you think you can stay peaceful, it kind of depends on who you're surrounded with, but if you think you can stay peaceful, or if you want to fight anyway, then consider being repulsive, because getting 6 points from it is really nice. It's a lot of points. Now notice that I can't take repulsive. You can only gain up to an extra 10. You can only double your picks, your race points. So you start off with 10, and you can only get up to 20. And because I've already got 5 total, 3 from spying, 2 from ground combat, I'm literally 1 point too many to get repulsive. But yeah, I'm not going to do repulsive because I quite like being able to talk to people. Charismatic is the exact opposite of repulsive. You're nice. Humans are charismatic. I guess we're good with dealing with aliens. Yeah, I know, we've got vast experience of that. But charismatic just means people like dealing with you more, and you get more from trade pacts. And now, actually, I should have really prefaced that all of this is, it has an impact, but here are the two most important ones: uncreative and creative. Creative is something that you should just take. If it's your first game, just take it. Like, don't anything else I can kind of say, like, oh, you could consider Subterranean, or you could consider this, you could consider that. Creative, I do not consider optional for your first game. And the reason for that is that the way the technology works in the game, and you'll see that in my next video a little bit, but I'll try to explain it here. So the way this works is that when you get a technology, so there are different levels to each technology tree. Like there'll be a physics tree. And every time you get, like, say, physics 2, the second level of physics, you get to pick a technology that's in there, and there'll be like 3 of them. And you pick one of those technologies, and that's the technology you get, and then the other 2 you cannot research. You're just not allowed. Those technologies you usually have to trade for with your neighbors or steal through spying. If you want those technologies, you're going to have to get them through other means. But not if you're creative. If you're creative, you literally get all the technologies that are part of that tree, which means that, instead of so much bang for your buck. Technologies win games. And funnily enough, creative I consider sort of like a military is good for a military race, because I feel like you have to get a lot of the industrial technologies, which precludes usually a lot of the military ones, but with creative you're going to get them anyway. So I think creative, just get it for your first game, because then you don't have to worry about technologies very much at all. Yeah, I would just get it your first game. I highly recommend, because it is very, very powerful, and I still play with it more often than not because I think it's just that good. That said, though, I would always steer clear of uncreative. It is the exact opposite. So like I said, like, you get to pick one technology out of the 3 that you're normally given as a choice. With uncreative, you get one of those technologies randomly instead of picking it, which means that, like, I really want this technology. Like, I've been building towards this technology. I've been kind of planning to have it, but because because it's one of 3, more likely than not, I'm not even going to get it. So uncreative can be really debilitating. If you want to play it later on as a challenge, that can actually be quite fun, because that changes the game quite a bit, being uncreative. But for your first game, definitely don't take uncreative, and I highly recommend you take creative. Other things, these last couple. Tolerant means tolerant of bad, like of toxic and radiated environments, and just makes your people tolerant of those places, and you'll be able to flourish there. I never think this is worth the cost of 10. It's kind of nice not to have to worry about pollution. Like, normally you lose production for having to clean up your polluted worlds. You have to clean up pollution. So you lose production doing that, and tolerant people don't have to do that. But there's a technology that literally does the same thing, which is core waste dump. It gets rid of all pollution. You kind of just dump it into the core of the planet. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but yeah. So another one, this would be good if it wasn't so dang expensive. At 10, it's just not worth it. If it was like a 5, I'd consider it. But at 10, it's just not worth it. Fantastic Trader means you get more money from trade agreements. Simple. Telepathic gives you a couple of bonuses to, like, spying and diplomatic stuff. But again, for 6, it's not really worth it. Lucky, like I said, random events and Antaran attacks are impacted by lucky. It's the only reason to have it. If you're not playing with either one of those, skip it. If you are playing with random events, I actually kind of recommend it, because some of those random events can really screw you over, so lucky is a nice one to have. Omniscient is another really nice one, because it is cheap. So Omniscient means you get to see the entire galactic map. And you automatically get to look at enemy fleets, which is really nice. And it says regardless of stealth, special abilities, or technology. So it's a perfect counter to the stealth ship one, which is the next one, which to me is baffling, because the stealth ships costs 4 and is kind of useful. Omniscient gives you all this other stuff and perfectly counters stealth ships. So, Omniscient's a pretty good one. Just being able to see everything on the map means you can plan better, and especially for your expansion. So Omniscient is one that I can definitely recommend. If you've got a couple of points to spare, like if you don't want to go for subterranean and large homeworld kind of stuff, Omniscient's a really good one. Stealth ships is again not that great. Like I just said, it just prevents other people from seeing your ships until they're like right there, which for the most part, I'm not sure if the computer sometimes cheats with that, but I feel like they do. So I've never had that be very good. Transdimensional increases the speed of your fleet, and for 5, It gives you a couple of other bonuses too, I think. Yeah, it gives you a little bit of extra combat speed, and yeah, it's not that great. For 5 points, it's just not that good. Warlord is, if you're intending to have a lot of battles, especially early on, Warlord is just a buff to a lot of their stuff. Like, your units are higher level, and your colonies produce extra command, which means you can have more units. You know, and it's got a bunch of little buffs, and I usually don't go for it, because 1, I don't do that much combat, and 2, I think these combat buffs aren't actually that great. But it's not a terrible one. It's cheap enough. For 4, it is cheap enough that you can totally get it. Okay, so let me recap. So you heard me go through all of these, but let me quickly highlight, you know, which ones I think are good and which ones I think you should steer clear from. I usually don't touch these. Ship, defense, attack, ground combat, and spying, I usually take a penalty in a couple of these, and that's just for preference. I usually leave my ships alone because I do a lot of ship combat, but I do ground combat and spying. Governments, you probably want a dictatorship just because it's cheap, and don't forget to buy those marine barracks. Otherwise, unification is pretty cool. I would not recommend feudal, and democracy is just kind of expensive, and I think unification is kind of better. Special abilities, subterranean is really good, creative is really good, uncreative is freaking terrible. I would not recommend uncreative. And then a lot of, and lucky if you're playing with random events. Omniscient, if is another good one. Charisma and repulsive is a good one to get if you're not intending to do a whole lot of diplomacy and just want the points. So yeah, that about sums up this screen. And now that was a big part of the game. Because here on the screen, you're sort of going to be picking what is going to be your strategy for the entire game. In this map, what are you going to be going for? And that's what you really want to think about. Like, do you want to be warlike and maybe get Warlord and a couple of ship attack bonuses or something like that? Or do you want to be pure? Do you want to rush industry and get like a production bonus and a rich homeworld? Do you want to be, very diplomatic and get like charismatic plus maybe fantastic traders, or any number of things? So that's what you want to think about on the screen, is how do you want to play the game, and that's in your selections is kind of what's going to determine that. But again, for your first game, just pick creative. Do yourself a favor and pick creative. Okay, so yeah, you get to pick your people name up there, which I just left it the same. You get to pick a ruler name, that's fine. Then you get to pick one of these flags. This is just the color of your ships and your banners. It also actually impacts what your ships look like, I'm pretty sure. Like, if you pick green, your ships are going to look different than purple. I'm going to green. It doesn't matter a whole lot. That's purely a cosmetic choice. Then it's going to generate the homeworld, the galaxy. You're going to get to enter your home star name, and now we are in the game. This is what the game looks like, and that's what I'm going to be talking about in my next video. So I'm just going to save this. We'll overwrite that. I'm running out of saves. Okay, and that's fine. So yeah, this is where we're going to be picking up next time. So I hope this video has been helpful in a sort of explain to you how you can create a race, and the next one is actually going to teach you how to play the game. Okay. Thanks for watching, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.